It was a crisp autumn morning when Aisha woke up to the golden sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. The leaves outside had turned a fiery mix of orange and red, and the air smelled of fresh dew and the promise of a new day. Aisha stretched lazily in bed, but her excitement made her wiggle out of the covers faster than usual. Today, she had decided she would explore the small park near her house before school. As she stepped outside, she noticed movement near the bushes lining the park. A small scruffy dog, barely visible under the shadows, was peeking out nervously. Its fur was matted, and its thin frame suggested it hadn't eaten well for days. But its eyes, oh those eyes, they were wide and alert, filled with caution and a flicker of hope. Aisha's heart melted instantly. She knelt down, extending her hand gently. "Hey there, it's okay, I won't hurt you," she whispered. The dog flinched, taking a cautious step back, but it didn't run away. There was curiosity in its cautious stance. She spent the next hour sitting a few feet away, talking softly and offering tiny pieces of bread from her pocket. Slowly, the dog inched closer, sniffing her hand, its tail wagging slightly, a small sign of trust forming. Aisha named him Shadow, because of how he seemed to appear quietly, like a shadow, and also because of his dark fur. When Aisha ran back home for her parents, Shadow hesitated at the edge of the park. But she returned with her mother, Sarah, and father Ali, carrying a small towel and some leftover food. "He looks hungry and scared," Sarah observed, her voice gentle. "We can't just leave him out here." Ali, although cautious, agreed. "We can't take him to the shelter immediately, but we can feed him and see if he trusts us enough to come inside." With patience and careful coaxing, Shadow eventually followed them to the porch, watching everything with wary eyes. He sniffed the door, sniffed the food, and then, after a tense few moments, allowed himself to take the first bite. Aisha cheered softly, her eyes sparkling with joy. Over the next few days, Shadow's presence began changing the household. He was timid at first, jumping at sudden noises, avoiding direct eye contact, and keeping his distance from the furniture. But Aisha never gave up. Every morning before school, she would sit with him in the garden, brushing his matted fur gently and whispering stories about her day at school. She laughed at the little hiccups he made when trying to drink water or chase falling leaves. Sarah watched with a soft smile. "You've got a gift with animals, Aisha. Look at him, he trusts you already." Ali nodded, watching Shadow gradually wag his tail at the sight of Aisha. "It's remarkable. It's as if he knows he's safe here." Shadow, once a creature of caution and fear, began to reveal pieces of his playful personality. He chased balls across the yard, barked at falling leaves, and even tried to follow Aisha around the house, stumbling hilariously over his own paws. One morning, Aisha caught him trying to jump onto the sofa, only to slide off and land in a small heap. They both burst into laughter, a sound that Shadow seemed to mimic with soft barks of his own. One rainy afternoon, Shadow's first major test of trust occurred. The storm had arrived suddenly, and thunder shook the windows. Shadow, terrified, hid under the dining table, trembling. Aisha crawled beside him, hugging him close. "It's okay, Shadow, I'm right here. Nothing will happen to us," she whispered. Slowly, the trembles lessened, and he leaned into her embrace, finally letting go of the fear that had gripped him for so long. This small victory cemented the bond between Aisha and Shadow. Every day, the family saw new sides of him, his curiosity, his playful mischief, and the way he seemed to sense when someone needed comfort. Ali found him sitting quietly beside Sarah when she was reading, resting his head on her lap. Sarah discovered him, nudging her hand when she looked sad after a long day at work. The community began noticing too. Neighbors smiled as Shadow trotted beside Aisha on their walks, his tail wagging proudly. Children in the park waved, and some even tried to play fetch with him, though Aisha always kept a protective eye. Shadow had grown confident, yet he never lost the quiet, thoughtful demeanor that made him feel special. A week after his arrival, Aisha had an idea. "We should officially make him part of the family," she told her parents. Sarah nodded, while Ali smiled warmly. They decided to bring Shadow inside the house fully, giving him his own corner with a soft bed, some toys, and a little blanket that smelled like the family. Shadow explored his new territory with cautious excitement, sniffing every corner, and finally curling up in the bed, exhausted but happy. That night, as the family sat together in the living room, Shadow lying peacefully beside them, Ali remarked, "I think we all needed him as much as he needed us." Double quotes. Aisha hugged him tightly, whispering, "You're never leaving, Shadow. You're home now." Shadow, sensing the depth of her words, rested his head on her lap, letting out a soft, contented sigh. It wasn't just a family who had welcomed a new member. It was a silent promise between a girl and a dog, a bond that would grow stronger with every shared walk, every laugh, every challenge, and every quiet moment of understanding. Shadow had found his safe place, and in return, he had begun leaving paw prints on their hearts, marks of love, trust, and the kind of friendship that lasts a lifetime. And so began the first chapter of their journey together, a journey that promised laughter, lessons, and unconditional love. all seen through the eyes of a little girl and her brave, scruffy companion. By now, Shadow had become more than just a pet. He was a companion, a guardian, and, in his own way, a member of the family. Mornings were filled with laughter as Aisha and Shadow raced across the yard. Shadow chasing after the frisbee with uncontainable enthusiasm, occasionally tripping over his own paws. Ali often joined them, tossing the ball farther than Aisha could, watching Shadow leap and sprint with growing confidence. But life with Shadow wasn't always carefree. One Saturday afternoon, the family decided to visit the nearby park for a small picnic. The sun was bright, the sky a perfect blue, and Shadow was overjoyed to explore his favorite place outside their yard. He sniffed every bush, barked at passing squirrels, and playfully nudged Aisha whenever she tried to run ahead. As the afternoon went on, Shadow's curiosity led him further from the picnic blanket. Aisha, engrossed in arranging sandwiches, didn't notice immediately. When she looked up, Shadow had disappeared. Panic struck her chest. Panic struck her chest. Shadow, she cried, running toward the direction he had vanished. Ali and Sarah sprang up, calling his name to Shadow had wandered into a dense part of the park where unfamiliar dogs and loud noises made him nervous. He barked cautiously at a stranger approaching, then darted further, lost in the labyrinth of bushes. Aisha's eyes welled up with tears. He's never gone this far before. What if he gets hurt? Ali placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, Aisha. He knows us. He'll come back. Let's just be calm and find him together. They spread out carefully, calling Shadow's name and whistling softly. After what felt like an eternity, a faint bark echoed from the other side of the park. Shadow had cornered himself near a small stream, too afraid to cross the water. His fur was wet and he shivered, but when he heard Aisha's voice, his tail wagged faintly. Aisha rushed to him, kneeling by the stream. It's okay, Shadow, I'm here. Come on, you can do it. With gentle coaxing, she helped him find a safe path across the shallow water. Shadow finally leaped into her arms, licking her face, as if to say, thank you for not giving up on me. Back home, Shadow curled up quietly beside Aisha, exhausted but content. The incident left the family shaken, but it strengthened their bond. They realized that love sometimes meant patience, courage, and being there even when things seemed scary. Shadow, in a small way, had shown them trust and loyalty that words could never capture. Days passed, and life settled into a joyful routine again. Shadow's playful mischief never ceased. He learned to fetch the newspaper, guarded the house during minor disturbances, and even comforted Aisha when she had nightmares. But a bigger challenge awaited them, one that would test their courage and the true depth of Shadow's bond with the family. One rainy evening, a thunderstorm unlike any before struck the town. The wind howled, and rain battered the windows with relentless force. The family huddled inside, Shadow pacing nervously, ears flattened against his head. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the backyard. The old tree by the fence had fallen, blocking the gate and knocking over the garden shed. Shadow immediately darted outside, barking furiously. Sarah shouted, Shadow, wait, but he was already at the scene. The family ran after him, slipping on the wet grass, hearts pounding. Shadow stood bravely in front of a trapped kitten, mewing in fear under the debris. Aisha's heart raced. Oh no, we have to save it. Shadow looked back at her, his eyes almost saying, I've got this. With careful coordination, Ali and Sarah lifted branches while Shadow nudged the kitten gently, guiding it to safety. After the ordeal, Shadow sat drenched and muddy, but victorious. Aisha hugged him tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. That was incredible. Shadow, Ali said, patting his back. You didn't just save the kitten, you reminded us what courage really means. From that day, Shadow became more than a companion. He became a protector, always alert, always ready to act. But his adventurous spirit sometimes led to hilarious mishaps too, like the time he chased a butterfly into the neighbor's yard and got temporarily stuck behind a fence, or when he tried to catch falling autumn leaves only to tumble headfirst into a pile of mud. Every incident, whether small or significant, strengthened the bond between the dog and the family. The family also noticed subtle changes in themselves. Aisha had become more responsible, learning to care for another living being. Sarah and Ali found themselves laughing more, worrying less, and cherishing small, unexpected moments of joy. Shadow, in his silent and loyal way, had taught them patience, empathy, and the beauty of unconditional love. Evenings became their favorite time of day. The family would sit together in the living room, Shadow stretched across their laps or curled beside them, ears twitching at every laugh, every sigh. They shared stories, watched movies, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence. Shadow's presence was comforting, like a living, breathing heart that kept them all connected. And yet, Shadow's adventures were far from over. The outside world still called to him with its scents, sounds, and mysteries. The family knew that challenges, big or small, would continue to come. But they also knew that together with trust, love, and courage they could face anything. Shadow was no longer just a stray dog who had wandered into their lives. He was a true member of their family, brave, loyal, and full of life. As night fell, Aisha whispered, stroking his damp fur after the storm, "We'll face everything together, Shadow, I promise." Shadow rested his head on her lap, his eyes reflecting the dim lamplight, and the quiet understanding that he had found not just a home, but a family who loved him unconditionally. The adventures of Shadow and the family were just beginning. Every day brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new moments of joy. And though storms literal and metaphorical would sometimes shake them, the bond between a little girl and her courageous dog had grown unbreakable, leaving paw prints not just on their hearts but on their very souls. Months had passed since Shadow had entered the family's life. The scruffy, wary stray had transformed into a confident, joyful, and affectionate companion. He had his favorite spots in the house, the sunlit corner of the living room, Aisha's bed during naps, and a patch of grass in the backyard where he could chase squirrels or roll in the dirt without interruption. Aisha had grown alongside him. She had matured in ways she never imagined. She woke up earlier to feed him, learned to bathe him carefully, and even helped Sarah with vet visits and grooming. Shadow had taught her patience, empathy, and responsibility. But more importantly, he had taught her the profound meaning of unconditional love. One crisp winter morning, the family decided to take a short trip to the countryside. Snow had just begun falling, dusting rooftops and trees in white. Shadow was ecstatic. He leaped through the soft snow, leaving tiny paw prints that Aisha immediately started tracing with her boots. They built a small snowman together, Shadow playfully knocking it over each time Aisha tried to perfect it. The peaceful day, however, took a sudden turn. While exploring near a frozen stream, Aisha slipped on an icy patch and tumbled into the shallow but fast-moving water. The current, though not very deep, was swift enough to carry her downstream. Panic surged through Shadow. Without hesitation, he leaped into the icy water, his strong instincts guiding him to Aisha. He barked loudly, swimming with all his might, nudging her gently with his snout, urging her to hold on to him. Aisha, shivering but trusting him completely, wrapped her arms around Shadow. He paddled steadily, determined to bring her safely back to the snowy bank. Ali and Sarah, horrified, ran along the shore, calling out instructions. Shadow responded, turning back only to make sure they were close, then pushing forward again with unwavering resolve. Finally, with one last push, Shadow dragged Aisha to the bank. Exhausted but safe, she hugged him tightly, tears mixing with melting snow on her cheeks. "Thank you, Shadow, you saved me," she cried, kissing his damp fur. Shadow barked softly, tail wagging, as if simply saying, "It's what I'm here for." The incident left the family shaken, but also in awe of Shadow's bravery and loyalty. That evening, as they sat by the fireplace, wrapped in blankets with cups of hot cocoa, Ali said softly, "He's more than a pet. He's a part of this family's heart." Shadow taught us courage today, not just by his actions, but by showing us what it truly means to care. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on Shadow's head. "And he's shown Aisha how love and trust can overcome fear. This bond, it's rare and precious." Life continued with its gentle rhythm. Shadow became a constant source of joy and comfort. He accompanied Aisha to school, walked with Ali in the mornings, and napped beside Sarah while she read. On birthdays and festivals, he was part of the celebrations, sometimes mischievously stealing a cupcake or tangling himself in ribbons, but always with the family laughing along. Shadow's presence also impacted the neighborhood. Children would gather at the family's gate just to see him, laugh at his antics, and sometimes feed him treats. Even the elderly neighbors, who initially worried about a stray wandering around, came to love his gentle, protective nature. Shadow had transformed not just the family, but the little community around them. As the years passed, the family faced ups and downs, minor illnesses, moving houses, and even moments of loss, but Shadow remained their constant anchor. His understanding gaze comforted them during sad times, and his playful energy lifted their spirits when days seemed dull. One spring afternoon, a new family moved into the neighborhood, bringing along a small frightened puppy. Shadow, older now but still spirited, approached the puppy with care. He nudged it gently, guiding it with the same patience and love that Aisha had shown him when he first arrived. It was a beautiful full-circle moment, the one stray dog now mentoring a young pup, teaching lessons of trust, love, and courage. On a quiet evening, as Aisha sat in the garden watching Shadow chase fireflies, she whispered, "You've changed my life, Shadow. You've changed all of ours." Shadow paused, looking at her with those deep, soulful eyes, and wagged his tail gently. It was a silent acknowledgement that he understood, that he had chosen this family, just as they had chosen him. Ali, observing them from the porch, smiled and said, "Sometimes, we think we're giving love. But the truth is, we receive it in ways we never imagined. Shadow has given us so much more than we ever gave him." Sarah joined, hugging both of them, and said softly, "He's left paw prints on our hearts. Forever." That night, the family sat together under the stars. Shadow nestled between Aisha's legs, occasionally lifting his head to sniff the night air or watch a passing owl. There was peace, there was love, and there was a deep sense of belonging. The journey from that shy, hungry stray to a brave, joyful, and beloved member of the family had been filled with laughter, tears, lessons, and adventures. And through it all, one truth remained undeniable. Shadow had not just found a home, he had found a family that loved him unconditionally, and the family had found a friend, a protector, and a heartwarming presence who would leave paw prints on their lives forever. No matter the storms, the challenges, or the quiet nights ahead, one thing was certain: wherever they went, they would always walk together, hand in paw, heart to heart.